years. And it's been a series of excuses. It was COVID, then it was tariffs, then it was oil, and it was transitory. At what point do people start believing this is more of a permanent thing? And at what point does that begin being priced into the market? And that's where I think you see that risk. On the opposite side, you still have a labor market, which has recovered the past 2 months or 3 months. But if you look at the hiring the last year, since the beginning of 2025, it's all been and more in health services, one narrow segment. And so I think there is still risk out there, but I do think if you look intermediate to longer term and start thinking about that, that's where, regardless of these risks, I like things that are cheaper. I like things that are underinvested. And that's where I would still focus more on those small and mid-cap stocks. And I also think that investors need to think about the 60-40 commodities, something that we have owned for much of the past 5, 6, 7 years. That's why I think there are two-sided risks going forward, not one-sided like existed for the past 15, 20 years, where it was just hedged by using long treasuries. Now I think you need to think about inflation being more permanent, maybe tied back to that Kevin Warsh commentary and where the president would like monetary policy to go.
Interesting. Brent Class Act. We appreciate your time. Brent Shitty there of Northwestern Mutual Wealth Management. One of the last lines there on inflation being above target for the last 5 years, I think is really important. The channel was asked about the supply side shocks that we've seen. And I would have to say in the news conference, they were almost dismissed as just something that was happening out there that we couldn't control. Some of these supply side shocks have been choices. They've been more frequent, and some of them have been choices, which is why some people think they're going to see more to come in the future. And this is something you've got to adapt to as an institution, not just sit here and say it's come out of nowhere. We can't do anything about it.
And frankly, there is a structural incentive for nations and for companies to build up.
Hello, my name is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and we are live streaming on Rumble, YouTube, and also on X Spaces. If you have a question, please type it in the chat. We're going to go over the markets, any breaking news, and how it may affect your potential financial situation. In addition, if you like the work that I do, because all these videos are for free, could you please help support by donating on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. That helps support the channel to allow for these videos to be free for everybody to learn from. Please subscribe to the different modalities that I have in terms of the content I create. You can watch my content on YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. You can also follow me on X and GETTR, Substack, TikTok, Patreon. So please help support the work, share the links, and ask your social media to follow me. I greatly appreciate it. I've spent a lot of time trying to inform the public on how to improve their health and wellness, but also how to take a look at the news and not to be fearful of the news, but how you can navigate through it and benefit from it. So I greatly appreciate it if you help support the channel. With that said, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos, and get the great products I have. I have ebooks. I also have course material on pulmonology and immunology. You can follow my work under broadcast. You can watch it live. You can also watch or listen to some of the archive material that I have under broadcast radio. And I have great supplements that will, if you stack them the way I tell you to, it'll help to improve your health and wellness, improve your immune system, and even your brain function. So with that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the magnesium and zinc, and the vitamin C and magnesium. Why? Magnesium and zinc is going to help boost up your immune system. But also magnesium is super important for your brain function. A lot of people are not taking enough magnesium to help with that brain function. Many people are magnesium deficient, or they're not taking enough of it to actually help with the anti-aging process. So please go to my store, get the magnesium and zinc. Also vitamin C and magnesium. This will help to boost up your immune system, help with your skin, and also your brain function. You can take them together for max benefit. So please go to my store, use discount 5, all caps, discount 5, you save some money, get healthy, and help with that brain function. It's really important. Unfortunately, my father passed away because of ischemic dementia. He passed away last year. So, a lot of people they're going to end up having different levels of dementia. It's really important. It's really important to look at some of the research, look at some of the supplementation and some of the lifestyle changes that one can do to actually reduce the chances of dementia. There's different types of dementia, but through supplementation and lifestyle changes, you can mitigate it. So please pay attention so you don't fall victim to dementia. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. It's really important. There is a holistic approach to the issue where you can mitigate the problem. All right. What I want to do is listen to CNN. This was about 9 hours ago. Why experts remain pessimistic even if Iran negotiations resume.
Introducing Indeed Career Scout. Get your resume tailored instantly.
I don't know who recommended Synergy to my family, but whoever did, I owe them a big thank you.
Do you think there's likely to be a second round of talks in Pakistan anytime soon? And are you optimistic about what may come out of it?
Anderson, I would never say I'm optimistic on anything regarding the Iran file. I am hearing from people in the region that the sense is we're winding our way to another round of talks, to a diplomatic path. And we'll see. That is definitely the sense that's out there. There's a lot of diplomatic work behind the scenes from mediators. The Chinese are leaning on the Iranians, I'm told. Who knows what's really happening? But I think we are likely to see a second round of talks. But I'm watching two indicators, and I think, separate the signal from the noise and what's being said from day to day. Number one is the ceasefire holding. Right now, yes, I think that's very good. Number two is this blockade of shipping from Iranian ports. Is that working? CENTCOM is very confident that it is. Some of the ship tracker data suggests some are squirting through. We'll have to see. But then the third thing, is Iran going to contest that or not? So right now, they're not. But if they do, then we're back into a conflict phase. So let me just kind of back up, Anderson. Right now, it looks like the diplomatic path is getting some traction. The ceasefire is holding. That's good. And all eyes still on the Strait of Hormuz. Is the U.S. blockade working, keeping that traffic away from the Iranian ports? That's going to really bite the Iranians. And the second part of that mission, though, for CENTCOM is to open the international passage to the Strait to give confidence to shippers to pass through. And that still seems to be not happening. So I'm keeping an eye on that. Keep an eye on the Strait of Hormuz. Is the ceasefire holding? And do we have this second round of talks before the ceasefire expires next week?
Ambassador Sherman, I mean, given your expertise in this, you've actually, led these negotiations and then took years of planning and more than 15 months of actual negotiations. What do you make of the status of these negotiations? I'm not sure if that's the right word, or talks about having talked.
So it's good that when the vice president went with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner the first time, he actually brought experts with him. You cannot do this kind of a deal without a team of very seasoned people with a lot of deep expertise, because even if you decide on one element, then you have to figure out how you implement it. Then you have to figure out how you verify it and monitor it and make sure it happens. And if you're trying to do, as the vice president said, a grand bargain, it means you have all of these elements on the table. They fight against each other. It could be that Iran would say, we'll give Hezbollah a little less money, but we want to only suspend enrichment for 2 years. So it all combines. And one of the things I think is quite critical, if they go back to the negotiating table, and I hope they do, but not for just 20 hours. It's going to take days, weeks, probably months to get it all done, if it's possible. I hope that they realize that nothing should be agreed until everything is agreed. It was the watchword of our negotiation, and it was critical to make sure that we had all of the T's crossed and all of the I's dotted.
So just to be clear, nothing agreed until everything is agreed. So no point by point, okay, that's a deal on this subject and now we're going to do this, because it's a jigsaw puzzle that all has to fit together.
Absolutely, it's a jigsaw puzzle that has to all be put together. And one of the problems that I think the Trump administration has had is two things. One, they've wanted at the beginning for Iran to simply capitulate. That's why the president says we've won.
I'm not a big fan of CNN because of the liberal bias, but what is interesting, extremely interesting, because CNN is having a loss of viewers. People are getting fed up with their wokeism. But Anderson Cooper, in his background, is the old style of actually doing the news. In the newsroom, people in the background. He's at a news desk, but not on a, some sort of platform with a theater space like most news networks have now. Fox has the same issue. Most of the shows on CNN. This style of in the newsroom pit and doing the news, that's the way to do it. That is totally the way to do it. Now, unfortunately, Bloomberg is even moving towards the contemporary way of conducting the news in a studio instead of in a newsroom. But this new way that Anderson Cooper is being filmed in the newsroom conducting the news, I think is the better way to actually do it. All right? But of course, there's still bias with CNN. But the thing is that I can see that they're trying to brand Anderson Cooper as kind of like an old school Walter Cronkite type of setting where you're in the newsroom doing the news. Okay, so let's just continue. That's just a tangent thought that I have here.
We've beaten them, we don't want them to win, but quite frankly, in any negotiation, even with adversaries, even if you find people odious, they have to feel like they got something or you can't get the deal done. So call it winning, call it negotiating, call it giving them something, but there has to be a deal, and a deal means both sides have to get something out of it. And secondly, I think the president has believed he can get this done in one big fix. And that's not how this process works. I wish it did. The last 28 days of the 2015 negotiation, John Kerry spent 19 days in a hotel nonstop to get to the final elements of this deal.
Scott, are you optimistic at all? Do you think this is going to lead somewhere?
I'm not very optimistic. I think there's two kind of core questions here. Who benefits from dragging the process out?
Time is on the side of Iranians.
It absolutely is on the side of the Iranians. And the second is which side can endure the most suffering and most pain. And I think clearly the Iranians have proven that as well. This idea that the blockade so ships can't come on, and this is a country that's been, had tens of thousands of bombs dropped on it the last month. The idea that it's going to somehow, kneel down because of the naval blockade, I think is silly.
The idea that this is now an potentially economic pain being inflicted on Iran, we've inflicted military pain on them. That hasn't really worked to cow them or have a regime change that actually results in something. You don't think economic pain is going to do it?
The economy was already in a shambles. That's what led to the demonstrations and the killings in January. I think that the regime. I think if you go back, and I think it's important to look at what happened in January. That the regime, there was demonstrations against the regime for 10 days that were largely peaceful. They were metastasizing in size. Finally, the government reached a point where it thought it was going to go down. So they killed 30 to 40,000 people in one weekend. They see their back against the wall. And as Ms. Sherman said, they need to feel like they're getting something out of any sort of negotiated settlement. And they don't have much to give because they could be overthrown by the people and they don't, they'd be slaughtered.
Yeah, Brett, I mean, this is not a popular government, and obviously there is support there, but there's 93 million people. There's a lot of people with a lot of different opinions. Is this a government that's motivated to really make some sort of a deal? Or what would be their major motivation?
I have to say, I largely agree with the thrust of what Scott's saying. I also have to, we have to have some humility. We really don't know what's happening inside Iran. And if we were on this 2 weeks ago, Anderson, and someone had said, we are going to see a ceasefire and then the highest level talks between Iran and the United States since the 1979 revolution, with Ghalibaf meeting face to face with the vice president and with the IRGC there and the entire team from Iran there, I would have said that's highly unlikely to happen, because I did not think the first move of whoever rises to the leadership ranks in Tehran after this conflict would reach out to the great Satan. The one thing that, going back to Khomeini, they said you cannot do. They really just shattered a taboo. So it's fairly extraordinary that that happened and that these talks are still ongoing. So I don't know. I agree. It'll take time.
Do you read that as a sign of potential desperation, or we don't know?
So you can read it two ways. You could say they feel so strong that they're coming to show that we have the strength and we're finally gonna meet with you face to face at the most senior level. We've never done it before. Or they're in some trouble, Anderson, and they actually they know it. And we are offering significant sanctions relief, as I understand it, which is something they want. And they can do a violent crackdown, but they also want, I think, alleviate some of the economic strain in their population. Yeah. So we have some cards to play.
Ambassador, if memory serves me correct, and correct me if I'm wrong, one of the criticisms of President Trump initially against the deal that you were intricately brought about in 2015 was money's paid, money that Iran got out of it. It sounds like any deal we make now, there's going to be a lot of money involved as well.
There's going to be a lot of money involved, and there's even been some discussion that there would be money that would be given in advance as sort of a sweetener to get a deal done. I think both Rhett and Scott are correct. There is economic pain for sure in Iran, but the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, is clearly in charge right now. Yes, they want to make sure that there is a future for their country, but I do think they feel that this is existential for them. They lived through the Iran-Iraq war for 8 years being just hammered, and they stuck with it. They are a culture of resistance. I think they may come to the table, but they're not going to give up the things that they believe are part of their national pride, and that includes, in their view, a right to enrich, in their view, to have a missile program, in their view, to have people in the region, their proxies, help them out. Whether we scale that back, whether we get to a place where we feel there's greater security about their commitment to not having a nuclear weapon, all of those things are important, but it's going to be tough negotiating. And the UAE is in China trying to get China to put pressure on Iran. I'm sure that's happening. The President of the United States is headed to China in May. There's a lot of incentive for him to get this to a better place.
Pride has a seat at the table. Ambassador Sherman, thank you. Brett McGurk, Scott Anderson.
Now, currently, the oil market for WTI is going down. It's trading at $91 a barrel and 31 cents. Natural gas is trading around 2.6, which is roughly where it was trading yesterday. A little bit less than what it was yesterday, but it's roughly the same. Now, as oil starts to creep down, the actual stress from the war on international markets will become less. Now, that doesn't mean it's completely eliminated, but it will be less stressful. Therefore, Trump will have more negotiating power. In addition, the degraded military of the IRGC, because of the United States and the Israelis hitting Iran and degrading the military, the Iranians don't have that strong of a position. So if Trump really wants the nuclear material from Iran, he could get it. Now the question is how long does he want to prolong this? How many ground forces or special forces does he want to commit to the effort of getting it? So that is in debate, but there is no way that the United States should be going down the road of allowing Iran to have enrichment of uranium that is beyond, just typical medical or industrial use. I mean, 60% uranium is way too high for civilian purposes. So the United States, I think, over time is actually having more and more bargaining power on this. The question is, will Trump end up using ground forces? Now, most likely, independent of if he sends in ground forces or not, chances are Trump is probably going to lose the House of Representatives during the midterm elections. So he's got nothing to lose. He's already going to lose the House. There's a high probability of this. So he might as well just roll the dice and take out Iran and get the nuclear material. And he should state to the American public, this may affect the midterm elections, but to make sure that another president down the road doesn't have to deal with this problem again, he needs to do this. And I think the nation in the aggregate will support Trump on that effort. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. Boomer Boost has 68 nutrients. It will focus on different systems like your cardiovascular system or musculature. It'll rev up your metabolism and increase your energy levels. It'll help with brain function. It'll allow you to sleep better. It'll get rid of that brain fog. You'll be able to concentrate. You'll have a steady burn of energy throughout the day. You'll have more vitality. And over time, you're going to notice that your endocrine system and your immune system is better. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. In addition, another great supplement to take every day is the omega-3. Omega-3 will help with your cardiovascular health. And with better blood flow, you'll improve your brain function and perfuse your other organ systems, and they will work better. Now, omega-3 will help to bring down inflammation and also control that lipid profile. So you're going to be bringing down LDL levels and increasing your HDL levels. So please go to my store, get the omega-3, take it every day for your cardiovascular health. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. All caps, discount number 5. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's listen into Al Jazeera.
Clear that what they're intending to do is to blockade Iran. So when we talk about a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, it's really a blockade of Iranian ports. So mixed messages just in the imprecise nature of Donald Trump's social media posts, but it's clear what the United States are trying to do. They're trying to choke Iran off from world markets, from getting money for their energy supplies, and stopping other countries using Iranian ports, which they hope will eventually put pressure on the Iranians. Particularly, they're hoping the Chinese, who get a third of their oil from Iran, will put pressure on Iran to get to the negotiating table.
It's approaching 9:20 in the morning in Washington. The president is up and posting on social media, as you say. Yeah, on Truth Social in the last hour, he's posted about Iran. What's exactly does he have to say?
Well, he's exchanged letters with Xi Jinping, the Chinese leader. He said that in an interview that he gave to the friendly Fox Business Channel on Monday. If we put the Truth Social post up on screen, you can see exactly what he has been writing. He says, China is very happy that I'm permanently opening the Strait of Hormuz. I'm doing it for them also and the world. This situation will never happen again. They have agreed not to send weapons to Iran. President Xi will give me a big fat hug when I get there in a few weeks. We're working together smartly and very well. Doesn't that beat fighting? But remember, in caps, we are very good at fighting if we have to, far better than anyone else. A couple of things in that. Donald Trump says often that the United States doesn't need the Strait of Hormuz. Now, if you're talking about oil supplies, it probably doesn't, but it does need things like fertilizer and aluminium. They have to come through the strait. He says that China has said it won't sell weapons to Iran. That's because there's been reporting that China is about to send new missile defense and air defense systems to Iran. Donald Trump said in an interview he gave this morning to a friendly TV station that he'd spoken to Xi Jinping and he had essentially said that he wasn't sending weapons. And so Donald Trump sees this as an important step. Remember, the two leaders are due to meet in Beijing in the middle of May. That will be an important meeting. Clearly, the Iranians clearly the Chinese have made their point that they want to see an end to the conflict. Donald Trump, in an interview on Monday evening, said we're getting very close to that point, perhaps within the next couple of days.
Our Chief US Correspondent Alan Fisher reporting live from the White House. Alan, many thanks indeed. Joining me in the studio, Ahmed Halal, who is the Managing Director for GCC at the Asia Group. That's a policy consultancy firm based in Washington, D.C. He's also an economic and political risk analyst. And Lorenzo Carmel, a professor of history, or of the history of international relations at the University of Turin, specializing in the Middle East and North Africa. He's live with us in Turin. Let's start with you, Lorenzo. Trump says that this war is now very close to ending. Is that, do you think, genuine confidence based on concrete evidence that negotiations are progressing, or bluster?
Most likely it's also the fact that Trump is aware that this war cannot be won, and the census funding is searching for an alternative. I want to remind you that Ronald Reagan invaded Grenada in retaliation for the humiliation withdrawal at the time. After that, there was a bombing barracks in Beirut in 1983. And in the last few hours, we know that Pentagon personnel and other U.S. governmental agencies have been secretly instructed by the Trump administration to intensify preparations for a potential military operation against Cuba. And this tells us that it could be that it's trying a way out, and Cuba or other could be somehow some tools to that in that direction. Then, of course, we know that it's imposing also a counter blockade to blockade. But the problem is that instead of somehow opening a strait, the Strait of Hormuz, is risking the closure of a second strait, that is Bab el-Mandeb, that connects, as we know, the Red Sea with the Indian Ocean. And of course, that is particularly critical for Saudi Arabia, but not only for Saudi Arabia. We know that about 12% of the world trade oil passes through that. So in that sense, the high risk now is that both straits will be closed as a consequence also of some of the policies that Trump is imposing in the region.
So, Ahmed, what Trump is talking of, the continuation of peace talks, as Lorenzo was saying, the US is tightening maritime pressure, turning ships back from Iranian ports. What's going on here? We've got diplomacy and escalation going on at the same time.
Yes, absolutely. A naval blockade of this kind is definitely an escalation. It's technically an act of war, and Trump is trying to achieve economic strangulation of Iran. It's only economic lifeline. It is the oil exports that have been leaving from Kharg Island and the other energy infrastructure that they have. So he's trying to achieve what he hasn't been able to through bombardment, to bring the Iranian regime to its knees. The fact of the matter is that Iran has a much greater tolerance for pain than the US has estimated. They have developed over decades a fortress economy. They've been under sanctions for decades, and they've been able to continue exporting even during the maximum pressure campaign. This is intended to really starve the economy of any remaining, the trickle of hard currency revenue that they were achieving of about $170 million a day.
And if what Lorenzo says turns out to be correct, if with Iran warning that it may widen maritime retaliation beyond Hormuz, if this US blockade continues, how dangerous is that threat?
Well, it's extremely dangerous because Hormuz handles about 20% in peacetime, 20% of natural gas, LNG, and oil transit for the global economy. And an equally important transit point and waterway is the Red Sea, the Bab el-Mandeb, which the Houthis are able to destabilize and block relatively inexpensively. So you would find a compounded shock to global energy markets, and you're going to go from what is now a price shock to a very, very real supply and physical shock.
Lorenzo, if both sides are still applying pressure, are we seeing genuine negotiations? Are we likely to see genuine negotiations if they get back around the table, or simply bargaining through coercion?
Yes, first of all, let's keep into account the fact that, of course, this war is not the same for all actors. There are some actors that somehow they are waging this war and they perceive it as an existential war. So it's existential for their how they organize their state. This applies to Iran, but to a large extent this applies also to Israel, to a non-state actor like Hezbollah. For the US, of course, this is not an existential war, and this makes a huge difference. That said, if and when the negotiation will resume in earnest, I think that Iran will put much less on the table and demand much more than the JCPOA in 2015. So, going back to history, but also much more than what would be the case just a few months ago. So, Iran, to a large extent, preferred escalation, betting largely on Hormuz and what it succeeded to is resistance.
Lorenzo, what does history teach us about whether diplomacy can succeed if both sides are still actively escalating leverage?
Yes, first of all, it is to tell us that you need always bargaining chip. So in the sense, you need to have some tools to end a war. So for instance, without this war, Iran would not be able to establish a unilateral control over Hormuz, which is more effective than any possible weapon. So in this sense, teach us that if you have something like this leverage, there are high chances that you find a way out. For instance, Lebanon, that we're not covering about Lebanon, that has not any bargaining power with Israel. The paradox is the only bargaining power is related to Hezbollah. So in the sense, if you don't have a bargaining chip, in that sense, you don't have a way out. While in the case of Iran, with all the problems that are there, it seems that there is the possibility in that sense to find a way out.
But oil markets remain under pressure despite this talk of peace. Are investors signaling that they don't believe that this crisis is, as the president says, close to a resolution?
I think Brent crude, the international benchmark, is trading at around $96, and I think that's an indication for me that markets are incredibly complacent. We're not in a price shock anymore. There are no more cargoes floating in the ocean from the Persian Gulf. Those are seas. There's no oil and gas. There's no chemical. There's no products, refined products leaving the Gulf. There is now a physical supply.
This is live on Al Jazeera, and right now WTI is trading at $90.92, so just under 91. And Brent crude finally started trading above WTI. For about a week, WTI was trading higher than Brent, which is rare. And Brent's trading at 95 right now. So things are starting to stabilize, getting back to normal correlations and slowly drifting down.
I think it's if you are today filling your car with petrol or gasoline, as Americans call it, you're talking about $4 a gallon. Asia has borne the brunt
by the
of this
end
crisis.
Of July. By the end of July, it's going to be
the first 4 weeks of the war. You've got national energy emergencies declared in countries like the Philippines. You've got workers forced to not show up for work, and schools and universities ceasing to operate, and rationing and subsidies. So that's all happening, and you have to remember that Hormuz isn't just an energy corridor; it's a multi-commodity industrial corridor, because you've got that.
All right, the market's going to be opening up soon, so please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the C60. You can get it in MCT coconut oil, avocado oil, and extra virgin olive oil. You can get it in a 2-ounce, 4-ounce, or an 8-ounce configuration. It is cheaper per ounce to get the higher ounce configuration. C60 is 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C as an antioxidant. All right, the markets are open. Take a teaspoon a day, every day, preferably on an empty stomach in the morning for best absorption. By taking this every day, you're going to improve your immune system, your endocrine system, your cardiovascular system, your brain function. Why? What's going to happen is that it's going to soak up free radicals. And by soaking up free radicals at the vascular level, you're reducing plaque formation. By soaking up free radicals in your brain, your neurons are healthier. And you're going to have better blood flow to your brain with a better cardiovascular system. And by soaking up free radicals in the different tissues within your cells, what's going to happen is you're going to have more energy because the health of your mitochondria is going to improve. And you're going to be producing more ATP, and the tissues will have less stress, less inflammation, and perform better. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the C60, take a teaspoon a day every day. I've been doing this as a part of my protocol for 10 years, every day, teaspoon a day. C60 will also help the basal layer, so your skin will improve. That's where your new skin cells are formed. C60 stacks really well with resveratrol and Boomer Boost. So please go to my store, use the C60 every day, and get healthy. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, markets are open. Let's do the market update here. The S&P 500 is trading at 6,978. VIX is trading at 17.53. So we're near that support. We're near that resistance level of 7,000. I have a target of 7,400 to 7,800 by year end for the S&P 500. If things de-escalate in Iran, we may even hit 8,000. All right, but right now there is a resistance level at 7,000 at the moment. The support level is 6,600 for the S&P 500. All right, now currencies, dollar is weakening a little bit relative to the euro. So people are now, this is a sign that people are now moving towards taking more risk, because people were buying dollars because of the risk in the Middle East, but that risk is starting to abate. So we have the euro trading at almost 1.18, and the Japanese yen is trading just below 159. Now, Bitcoin is trading at 74,000. Natural gas is trading at 2.596. So natural gas is starting to drift lower, like I was saying it would. And oil is trading just below $91 a barrel for WTI. Now, if you take a look at the long ETF, 3 times leverage, that's for UCO, which is tied to the underlying Brent crude, or not Brent crude, WTI crude. So UCO ETF is trading at 40.87, so it's starting to drift lower. And SCO, which is the inverse, is starting to appreciate, and that's trading at 7.875. Okay. So we should continue to see oil drifting down. Now, what was interesting is later in the session yesterday, oil broke the 94 barrier support level for WTI and started to go down. Now, last night, it went down as low as 88 and then came back up to about 93, and now it's trading at 91. So it's drifting down and coming up, drifting down, coming up, right? And it's slowly harmonically dissipating. So it's slowly getting lower and lower. So I suspect that UCO will continue to drop in the near term, and SCO should appreciate. Now, what's interesting, at least from yesterday, UCO is dropping faster than SCO is climbing. So there's a little bit of a tracking error with that hedge. Yesterday, it was SCO appreciated a little bit above 3%, while UCO depreciated by 5%. So there's about a 2% tracking error with that. All right. Now let's play, I want to play the live now clip about Trump permanently opening Strait of Hormuz. China is happy.
Grab your dogs, your permits, your moves. AI levels of your pitch, get it in a groove. Draft design, deliver, make it sing. AI builds the deck so you can build that thing. Do that, do that, do that with that Acrobat.
Boom! That's a winner. I didn't think you was a baseball fan, man.
Come on, I love homers. And this little bad boy lets me pick one for free every day of the week. I can make a pick for Moonshot Monday, Tater Toot.
As oil prices fell on hopes for an end to this fighting, and in the U.S., stocks surged close to records set in January. Now, meanwhile, in Washington, the first direct talks in decades between the Israeli and Lebanese ambassadors to the U.S. concluded on a productive note Tuesday. That's according to the U.S. State Department. An initial round of talks held last weekend, though, in Pakistan, aimed at permanently ending the U.S.-Iran conflict, failed to produce an agreement. The White House said Iran's nuclear ambitions were a central sticking point. Now, President Trump saying that this war could be coming to a close shortly. Here, I want to play out this soundbite from Fox Business.
I had to divert, because if I didn't do that, right now you would have Iran with a nuclear weapon. And if they had a nuclear weapon, you would be calling everybody over there, sir. And you don't want to do that.
Well, you keep saying was. Is this war over?
I think it's close to over, yeah. I mean, I view it as very close to over. You know what? If I pulled up stakes right now, it would take them 20 years to rebuild that country. And we're not finished. We'll see what happens. I think they want to make a deal very badly.
That was a post there from President Trump. My producer is actually just flagging for me here. This is a new Truth Social that the White House just shared from President Trump saying China is very happy that I'm permanently opening the Strait of Hormuz. I'm doing it for them, also, and the world. This situation will never happen again. They have agreed not to send weapons to Iran. All right, joining us now is Jonathan Saidi with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you so much for taking the time, as always, to break this all down for us.
Hi, Christy. It's great to be with you again.
Let's just start with this news that just came out from the White House, that post there from President Trump speaking on the Strait of Hormuz. What's your initial reaction to that?
Well, it's no surprise that ultimately China wants the goods the supply chain to still flow through the strait. That even though when we talk about the strait being closed or open, we should not be looking at it in black and white terms. This is something that Tehran was dictating as to who gets to pass, and Chinese vessels were allowed to cross. But that said, that doesn't mean the supply chain as a whole was resolved, which is ultimately something that China prefers for it to be open. Frankly, most countries in the world are still implicated by these economic challenges, so that's not necessarily a surprise. But let's see how effective this blockade will be, because the key term with any economic pressure, whether it's going to be sanctions or this naval blockade, is persistence. If the idea is for us to somehow build leverage, then it's going to take time. So that's going to be a bit challenging to want to end the war really soon, but at the same time be tapping into tools that are really for long-term strategy. But we have to wait and see whether the administration is simply trying to build leverage for talks, or they're just using this blockade to deprive the regime of cash flow to maybe tap into something internal, might want to deprive the repression apparatus and the military establishment from salaries so they can get some internal fractures. We have to wait and see.
And as we're taking live look there at the Strait of Hormuz, President Trump saying he's permanently opening the strait. Really, when we're talking about oil prices and what we can expect going forward over the next coming days or weeks here, as now people are getting excited that talks may resume. What can we expect to see out of the Strait of Hormuz here?
Of course, markets are going to react to perception more than what's really the facts on the ground. Still, some Iranian vessels were able to allegedly pass the blockade. Again, none of it is necessarily confirmed, and it doesn't specify what vessels they were, nor did it say which ports they eventually used. But for this blockade to be also long-term, and parallel strategy needs to be some sort of a humanitarian channel, because Iran still relies heavily on food, grains, and different material that it imports, medicine as well. So we need to ensure that we don't let the regime win the PR battle. We want to ensure that, similar with the maximum pressure campaign, it is very clear for the world to see that our blockade is specifically against Iranian illicit oil exports, arm exports and imports, and it's not there to target the average Iranian. That's very critical. But when we talk about any form of economic pressure on a regime, and similar conditions here also apply.
Now, I also wanted to ask you about this, with both sides signaling an in-principle agreement, which is what is being called here, to extend the ceasefire. How real is the momentum towards a lasting deal this time?
So I think we heard that the sticking point again is Iran's nuclear ambitions, and on the surface, it seems like there's a compromise. On one hand, Washington says halt enrichment for 20 years, then Tehran's rebuttal was, let's say, 5 or 10 years. But the issue with that is, similar with the JCPOA, we haven't heard the details, meaning we don't know what the halt to enrichment means. Are they going to give up all their centrifuges?
Why are they asking for enrichment? They shouldn't be having enrichment. That's the whole point. They should never have the ability to have a nuclear weapon. It's not negotiable. And this is the worry I have with the Trump administration, is they're going to give up and kick the can down the road later.
Or are they simply going to just temporarily put them out of order? And that was the challenge with the JCPOA. They still maintain a lot of their centrifuges. They still, in theory, were able to have a close breakout period. If this is going to be the same situation where Iran doesn't give up most of its centrifuges, then that begs the question, how is it going to be any better or reliable than the JCPOA? The issue with Iranian enrichment is not simply the fact that it's getting postponed, let's say even 100 years. It's about what capability the regime possesses. So that is not a simple sticking point, I would say. And on top of that, you have two more lingering issues that were never part of conversation to begin with, such as the Strait of Hormuz being one, or Iran asking for somehow a compensation for a war that it effectively instigated by weaponization. So you see this ambitious regime that is now demanding stuff that is never demanded before. Because of those, I don't see this being as probable as what we might think. But that said, we've reached the point that maybe two sides would benefit from a longer ceasefire. Iran wants to project an image of calm domestically, and so does Trump with the market. So we have to wait and see, but extension of the ceasefire does not necessarily translate to success in talks.
Let's stay on that, because that was going to be my next question to you here. Is those three sticking points, which is, as you said, Iran's nuclear program, the Strait of Hormuz, and war compensation. Of those three, really, what is the most difficult one to resolve? What's that one point that we're going to see really be coming back and forth here in these talks, these negotiations?
I hate to admit that it might be all three of them. So starting with the most, dare I say, bizarre or outrageous one would be the demands for compensation. That is probably Tehran's way of demanding some sort of a short-term sanction waiver or sanctions relief. Instead of calling it a removal of sanctions, they might be calling it a compensation because their economy is desperate for cash flow. They need to rebuild their missiles that they've depleted. They need to build launchers. They need to artificially inject the market with some sort of currency to at least get rid of a bit of the inflation there. That's one. And the nuclear issue has always been lingering. And frankly, I think of, the negotiations that Tehran had with the Bush administration, the centrifuges and enrichment were an issue then all the way, and now we're like decades later, we're still struggling to find an avenue there. And what Obama did is he provided enough concessions on that, allowed Tehran to maintain enrichment capability. Trump has seen that as a red line. That's going to be, of course, the main sticking point. Now, getting to the Strait of Hormuz, I do think Tehran is now getting more ambitious with demanding that the ships pay toll. I think some of their regime officials were comparing this to the Panama situation, with a stark difference being Panama's not attacking vessels with drones and missiles, and it's not ran by an FTO similar to the IRGC in Tehran. So no matter what angle you look at, they all look really challenging. Tehran's demands continue to be maximalist. They know Trump wants to conclude this war soon, so they're really putting everything on the table and demanding all of it.
The issue is that Panama Canal is actually through a canal, all right? The Strait of Hormuz is a issue of freedom of navigation. I mean, a strait and a canal are two totally different things.
We know those talks left.
Pace University gets people where they want to go. Through immersive academics, real-world experiences, a customized approach that takes...
We know those talks last weekend in Pakistan failed to produce an agreement. So President Trump, as I just shared that soundbite with our viewers there, saying that these talks set to resume within the next coming days. But given what we saw just so recently without those talks really going anywhere, what is going on behind the scenes as we lead up to potentially another round of these conversations?
I don't think the expectation was for the first round of talks to necessarily produce anything that concrete or written. Negotiations, especially with two sides that are at war, is certainly going to take time. So the first one or two stages really need to provide enough of a framework for them to work off of. And what we saw with the first announcement, there was a major contradiction between what Tehran said versus what Trump announced when he mentioned there was going to be a ceasefire. Tehran was effectively stating that the United States had agreed to all of its 10 demands. We know that's not the case. And you have to wonder really what they were negotiating over. To your point, as to behind the scenes, were they not able to even have a baseline understanding as to what are the main principles that they're going to be negotiating over or not? We didn't see that. And you have to look at the rhetoric coming from Washington after the first negotiations led by J.D. Vance, being the third person in the Trump administration that's talking to Tehran. First, we had Wickoff, Kushner, and now J.D. Vance. And you see the same tone coming from all of these three officials. They first enter negotiations with optimism, willing to provide some sort of a compromise. Then they return slightly disappointed, but while maintaining some sort of positive, open, and public diplomatic messaging saying we're still optimistic. We've seen this play out time and time again. I have not seen any indication that would make me think the talks that were led in Pakistan were any different than the talks in Rome or Amman.
I also wanted to ask you this. So these talks are reportedly being mediated through countries like Pakistan, Saudi Arabia. How critical are these intermediaries when it comes to getting a deal done, and why them?
It is critical for them. And frankly, when I look at the region, Oman put in the most amount of effort that was effectively left out of this latest ceasefire talks. I can't imagine they're happy about it. But that's it comes down to Pakistan here in this context. Of course, we always call the Islamic Republic of Iran the true Islamic Republic, whereas in reality, Pakistan is also an Islamic Republic. They have an incentive to keep the regime afloat. You're talking about a Shia versus Sunni Islamist ideology. You look at how Pakistan has operated as a quote-unquote ally by housing Osama, and now Osama bin Laden, and now they're more or less liaising with the regime in Tehran. Pakistan's role is critical, but that said, they're benefiting from it the most, which is why they have these ambitions that they do. But ultimately, no matter what mediator you have there, it comes down to how much the two sides are willing to compromise. I can't imagine any Pakistani official being able to convince Iranians to give up enrichment, or being able to convince the U.S. administration to give up its red line of enrichment. So when it comes to these core sticking points, mediators can only do so much. It ultimately comes down to what the two sides see as their main leverage. And like I said, Tehran is sensing desperation, which is why it's really moving forward with maximalist demands.
Oh yeah, staying on Tehran as well, they are threatening to retaliate. So two questions here. What could that potentially look like, given what we've already seen? And would that most likely come if we see that maybe, again, these talks don't yield any progress?
On your latter, we absolutely might. The threat of re-escalation is very real right now. But as to what it could look like, we've already seen glimpses. So, of course, Tehran is really good at towing the line, not really escalating, at least publicly. And by that, I mean, for example, when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, it was not a total blockade. They allowed certain ships to pass, they blocked some. Again, they left it in the gray area. They might do the same thing with the ceasefire as they have already, which is using their proxies to wage attacks. They're using some militias in Iraq to target Bahrain allegedly, or they might still be rogue elements within the IRGC. We don't know, and that's how they operate. They operate with the uncertainty. They will probably leverage some of these terror networks to reinforce this escalation, while also having plausible deniability, saying we were not involved, it was XYZ proxy. That is one realistic avenue. The other scenario here is that should the talks fail, the United States might actually want to enter this from a position of strength. We've seen Trump do that before. In the two prior negotiation rounds, as soon as the negotiations failed to materialize, it was Washington that sent a very strong message saying that our threats are real and we will back those up. But that said, I don't know when it comes to domestic politics, how confident Trump feels to relaunch another campaign, given that midterms are coming up and given that the oil prices are finally calming. So because of those reasons, it's more likely for Tehran to escalate. And the third scenario, and the final point on that, is there might be a situation where the United States effectively just does not demand a deal, just walks out of the scenario and just leaves the conditions for the EU and the Persian Gulf Arab states to somehow navigate. That is also another possibility, which would mean that any hostility would have to therefore be initiated by Tehran.
All right, Jonathan, and for our viewers just tuning in, I do just want to share this again.
If the United States doesn't collect the nuclear material, this is just kicking the can down the road, and it's going to get worse. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the collagen. This will help to remodel your joints if you have a, let's say, you have arthritis, or if you have a sports injury. Take this every day. Do some stretching exercise, a little bit of rehabilitation on the joint. But what this will do is help to remodel the cartilage and the cushioning of the joint. It will also help to reduce joint erosion by blocking certain enzymes, bring down the inflammation by blocking certain enzymes. And when that happens, you're going to have less pain. All right. So please go to my store, get the collagen. You can stack this with the collagen that I have. And then you just do some simple, light, resistant exercises with the joint. Open it up slowly over time, and eventually you're healing. So what you want to do is you want to open up the joint that's hurting you, either through, sometimes the pain is flex or extension, so flex or an extension, so depending on what kind of pain you have. But whatever the pain is, go up to the pain level right when it starts to hurt, and then go a little bit more, and then hold it there for about 20 seconds. And then release, wait a few seconds, and then do it again. Just up to the point of pain, a little bit more, 20 seconds. And do that to the point where you're going to be able to open up the joint. If you can extend the joint or flex the joint fully. And over time, you will notice that you're going to have less pain, and you're going to actually have a healthier joint system. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the collagen and stack it with the collagen. I also have a pain relief. It's called Super Strong Relief. If you have muscle aches, arthritis, bruise, sprain, or even tension headaches, use this. It will alleviate the pain within 90 seconds. It's a topical, so you apply it to the area of the pain. So if you have a headache, you want to put it around your forehead, your temples, around your neck and shoulder muscles to relieve that tension headache. But if you have arthritis, let's say in your hand, put it on your hands and it'll alleviate that arthritis. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the Super Strong Relief. It'll help to reduce pain. And you can stack this, all right, to reduce the pain and then to help to remodel the joint. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And also, I have structural nano silver soaps. You can get it in peppermint and in lemongrass. That's what I have in stock right now. Get a few bars for your household. These soaps will neutralize and help with the health of the skin and the pores. And it has that magic ingredient, natural nanosilver, structural nanosilver. So what you want is to use this every day to improve your skin. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And if you spend $100 or more, you will get a free gift until supplies last. You can use discount 5 on any order, all caps, discount 5. please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's listen to Mr. Deep State, John Bolton.
The president told Fox Business today in an interview that he believes the war is close to being over. Does it seem like it is close to being over in your view?
Well, not in a way that's satisfactory to the United States. I do think Trump has wanted out of this for quite some time. It's palpable in the way he discusses it. He just can't figure out how to do it in a way that he can declare victory with a straight face. I don't think in the near term you can declare victory until we have militarily cleared the Strait of Hormuz such that Gulf Arab oil can get out. I think it's the right thing to do to blockade ships going to and from Iran. But I think what's critical to demonstrate that Iran is not the hegemon in the Gulf is that we have to make it safe for the other oil producers to get their oil out, which will have a material impact, I think, on the global economy. And while shutting Iran's exports down, certainly have a material effect on their economy, too.
Well, I mean, you are arguing, you think this ceasefire is a mistake, that Iran could regroup during this. There are new satellite images today. They were reviewed by CNN that appear to show Iran digging at the entrance of missile bases where their missile launchers are trapped because of the strikes from the United States and Israel. Do you think this is something that they could potentially access during this ceasefire period, or what's your sense of these images?
Well, I think that's what they're certainly trying to do. I mean, we've got intelligence reports that indicate that the administration's claims of success, particularly against missile launchers, may have been overly optimistic. The silver lining here is let them dig them out, let them bring them out. I assume we're going to be watching all these very carefully. As they bring them out, we destroy them, and we can close the tunnels again. This is a question that requires resolve on the part of the president. Now, whether he thought about that in advance or not is highly unclear. But it's a mistake at this point to look for an easy way out. I think the government of Iran has been badly damaged. I don't buy the argument that the regime is still intact, still functioning. I think it's clearly been set back. President Pezeshkian was quoted in the press today saying it would take 12 years to get Iran's economy back to the point where it was on February the 28th, and where it was on February the 28th was in the cellar. So we've had enormous impact, and this is not the time to pull back.
Can I ask you, just as someone who worked closely with President Trump when he was in the Oval last time, you were in the Situation Room with him. I mean, as we've been watching, he's lashing out at the Pope after he said, and was critical of the war in Iran, and said that there should be peace in Iran. He lashed out last week saying a whole civilization will die tonight in Iran before calling off his threat and implementing the ceasefire. Last night we had Marjorie Taylor Greene on, and she was saying that she worries about the president's mental stability because of things like that. As someone who worked with him, what is your view on that?
Well, I'm not a shrink, so I don't know what purpose it serves by saying he's a narcissistic sociopath. I mean, that's not the issue. The issue is he doesn't know what he's doing. And I think a lot of the behavior shows the panic that he's in, that he can't see a way out of this. For whatever reason, he thought it would be easier than it was. I can't believe he wasn't told that by the Pentagon and others, told that they would try and close the Strait of Hormuz, told that they would go after the Gulf Arab countries. He apparently either didn't listen or didn't believe it, and now he doesn't know what to do. So I think
no. John Bolton's wrong here. I am sure they said that these types of situations could arise, and it was based on probabilities. And Trump decided, and it is his prerogative to look at the mosaic of the information and make a decision what he wants to do. But this idea of this binary concept of he was told or not told, most likely the Pentagon and the chief of staff, the chiefs, basically said, this is the game plan. These are the potential things that could arise and what the probabilities are. Now, maybe they didn't put an exact probability, 33% this way, 10% this way, maybe not. They may have said high probability, low probability, medium probability. maybe it was more qualitative instead of quantitative probabilities. But this has been in the works for 5 years. They've gamed this for 5 years. There is zero chance that the president didn't know that there was a potential for the GCC to get hit, that infrastructure could be damaged, and the strait could be closed. Now, based on their assessment, they thought that IRGC and the theocratic regime would have fallen quicker. All right? But that's like saying they think that with this military operation, they have an 80% chance of falling within, let's say, 4 weeks, especially after, you got to remember, what was happening before we hit? There was a lot of unrest and they were killing their people. So there was already social disruption going on. They had huge economic problem. So you hit the infrastructure, you degrade it, and you would have thought that there would have been an overthrow. It didn't happen. All right, there was an 80% chance that it was going to be a little bit easier and have the IRGC and the theocratic regime, especially to decapitate them on the first night, that it was going to topple. Well, there's a 20% chance that it didn't. And it just so happened that it was the 20% chance. Now, I don't know exactly what the probabilities were, but there is zero chance that Trump didn't have either qualitatively or quantitatively what certain things could happen during the operation. This is being disingenuous. Bolton's being disingenuous because he hates Trump. He wants to make it seem as though Trump doesn't know what he's doing. But the thing is, the Pentagon, through 5 years of war planning, having the strike package built up, you have to remember, this was designed in Biden's administration. Now it was fine-tuned based on intel, but there is zero chance that the Pentagon and Trump didn't know what, at the very least, the qualitative risks were. Zero chance. It's too simple to spin it in the mainstream media like this. They're not going to spend $100 billion and say, well, we're for sure that the theocratic regime is going to be toppled. No, I'm sure that the war planners were going, this could take longer, and we think that, maybe it's 20% chance. Well, it just so happened it's taken longer. But Trump shouldn't be backing down. Trump should just move forward, push the pedal to the metal. Instead of these deep staters that failed when they were making decisions and had advisory capability to the president, they failed. So it's too simple. It's too much of a simpleton to think Trump didn't know that there was a potentiality of the IRGC to dig in. Of course he knew. The question is, what was the probability? And because it happened, it just so happened, well, that's the way it is. You try to mitigate those risks the best you can. My concern is that Trump leaves before finishing the job.
More than anything else.
Well, I think people might hear that and say, you say he doesn't know what he's doing. I mean, he is the sole decision maker pretty much when it comes to what happens next.
And that's the way it should be.
In terms of the United States is.
He is the sole decision maker based on getting the information from his advisors. Now, if the advisors don't give him information because they're scared, or they're giving information that is not up to date or purposely falsehoods, then that's a problem. But it is his sole decision. Everyone in the room could say, Trump, I think going into Iran is a bad idea. And he says, I think otherwise, we're going in. It is his 100% decision to do that. He has 100% authority to do that. He can override his advisors. What's this idea that the president has to follow the advisors? Oh, that's a concept where the deep state corners the president and the optionality is based on only what the deep state wants and not what the president wants. That's not what our Constitution says.
Waiting and listening to him, whether it's, can they have 20 years of enrichment? Can they, before they can enrich, can they do this? Can they do that? I mean, for you to say that he doesn't know what he's doing, I think is probably pretty alarming to some people.
It's just false what he's saying.
Well, I don't see that as much different from the first term. He does not think in strategic terms, contrary to what his supporters say. He does not play three-dimensional chess. He sees international affairs through the prism of his personal relationships. So when he thinks the Pope is attacking him, his immediate reaction is attack the Pope. None of this is part of a bigger picture. These communications are not part of an overall communication strategy. In fact, what he did at the beginning of the administration,
I think that's totally wrong. It's either there is he's a very lucky person and he's just incompetent, like Bolton's saying, but I'd rather be good. I'd rather be lucky than good. All right? You can be good at something and not lucky, and it's terrible. But if you're bad at something and you happen to be lucky, well, you win. So it's better to be lucky. But the thing is that it's hard to believe that there's not a larger strategical plan here. And let me prove my point. We went into Venezuela first, before we went into Iran. You think that was by accident? No, of course not. We needed the heavy crude to feed our refineries in Pad 3 and Pad 2 to make sure they don't shut down. So when we go into the Middle East, we still had downstream products being created. Now, our Pad 1 along the East Coast needs a different density of crude. And some of that is coming from the Middle East. So we made sure that we secured enough oil to make sure our major refineries in Pad 3, which is in Texas and Louisiana, didn't shut down by going into Venezuela and securing the oil. In addition, we were able to skim off some of the shipments that were going to China. Now, at the same time, Venezuela is not too far away from Panama. And we've been hearing about this battle between, these arguments between the United States and China about what's going on with Panama Canal. So if you really want to have the technate, which is basically a region, an economic region of the United States, Canada, Greenland, Central America, Colombia, and Venezuela, you better control the Panama Canal. Okay, so that's the first step. The net, and you have forces in that region where you can control the Panama Canal just in case you need it to be able to move forces into the Asian theater. Okay, next step, go into Iran. And now you are able to control the oil. Now, what did we just hear about China? China's concerned that oil isn't going to flow to them. All right, and this is whole tied into the 9-dash line and the Strait of Malacca in the Indo-Pacific, and China's all worried about the hegemonic power of the United States. So this is a way to check China, saying, beware of going into Taiwan, and make sure that we, the United States, has freedom of navigation through the 9-dash line. Now, why is the 9-dash line so important? That region supposedly is hereditary for China, but it also has energy. And China wants that energy. China's energy is mostly, it's heavily dependent, I should say, heavily dependent on coal burning. and that's domestic, mostly domestic. They need to import crude and natural gas. So they either get it from the Northern Passage from Russia, or the pipeline from Russia in the north, or from the Middle East, or from the United States. Now, if you go to war over Taiwan, do you think the United States is going to send you your oil? So China can only get the oil from Russia or the Middle East. But if the United States is aligned with the GCC and Iran, or at the very least can control the strait, we can chokehold the actual oil flow to China. So if you paid attention to what just transpired last night and this morning, the United States is signaling China, don't worry, we'll let your oil in. So they aren't so concerned about us controlling that region. If we can control Iran, we also have a southern front on Russia. So this has the potentiality to move Putin to start trying to de-escalate the issue in Ukraine, which is really important because if Russia is aligned with the United States, we can use them to help fight China. Same thing with India. If we can be friendly with India, we can use them as an ally against China. So the war in Taiwan is not just about Taiwan. It's also about Tibet and India and the Strait of Malacca, 9-dash line. So to say that Trump doesn't know what he's doing, whoever's advising him, that's the overall game plan. And he's bought into it. Because all you got to do is see what were the previous moves that he made in the context of trying to check or trying to mitigate some of the expansionism of China in the Pacific along the First Island chains, and them trying to control the 9-dash line. All these moves that Trump's doing is trying to circumvent China. So how can, I'm not an expert at international policy. I know a lot about medicine. I know a lot about finance. I know a lot about engineering. I have some common sense. But I'll tell you this, there is no doubt in my mind that Trump is either being told to do something that is going to be actually beneficial to the United States to fight China or to weaken China's hegemonic rise. Or it's something that Trump has been thinking about for a very long time. To think that Trump is just knee-jerk reaction to everything, there is zero probability that all these were just random events and that they weren't orchestrated. Why does he keep on saying that he wants Greenland? That's part of the technique. Because what it's going to do is allow us to build the Golden Dome, and also it'll allow us to control that Arctic Passage, which is going to be really important when the ice continues to melt. Now, right now, the North Passage for Russia and China commerce only is happening between July and October. But as there's more receding of the ice sheets, that's going to be expanded, maybe by 2 or 3 months. So having control of Greenland is really important. So it's just Trump just being just full of bluster and doesn't know what he's doing. If you really paid attention to me, I just proved that Trump does know what he's doing. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the heirloom barley. This will help to detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals. When you do that regularly, your immune system is going to improve, your endocrine system will improve, your cardiovascular system will improve. Why? Because by bringing down inflammation and soaking up free radicals, you're reducing plaque formation. You'll also improve your brain function by having better blood flow to your brain and making sure that you don't have inflammation. Chronic inflammation at the brain level is going to cause problems with the neurons. You're going to have the neurons start to recede. You'll have less good blood flow to the brain. And what is going to happen is that you're going to have misfolded proteins. Well, when you have an accumulation of misfolded proteins and you're not detoxifying your central nervous system enough, you're going to end up getting early onset of dementia because there's a buildup of amyloid. So please, take my advice. Keep inflammation down, soak up free radicals, and detoxify your body regularly. And a great way to do that is to take the heirloom barley. You can stack this with the Boomer Boost to get added benefits. In addition, because this brings down inflammation, you'll recover quicker after a workout. You'll notice that when you're working out and you're taking this, you're actually recovering quicker. It also helps with your joints and bring down that inflammation to allow those joints to heal. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the heirloom barley, very high quality, this is a month's supply. And again, if you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last.
Part of our ability to communicate our point of view into Iran, which would be very helpful to be doing right now.
Can I just ask, what would you have said to the president if he was attacking the Pope over what he said about Iran, if you were the national security advisor still?
Stop.
On that note, Ambassador John Bolton, thank you for joining us.
Very close to over. That is how President Trump is describing the war with Iran in a new interview this morning. Of course, it's also how he described it 4 weeks ago. This is the new assertion.
Is this war over?
I think it's close to over. Yeah, I mean, I view it as very close to over. You know what? If I pulled up stakes right now, it would take them 20 years to rebuild that country. And we're not finished. We'll see what happens. I think they want to make a deal very badly.
All right.
So that was the new statement.
I want to pivot over to a different topic here. Let's listen to this argument that's going back and forth between Trump and the Pope and J.D. Vance's take on it.
Middle of that. I thought it was going to be easy questions. This is kind of a tough question here.
Nope, no easy ones there.
So here's the thing about this. So first of all, you will sometimes hear people say, well, you know, the Vatican, the church, whether it's the Protestant church, the Catholic church, like, you know, they should preach the gospel, they should ignore public policy. I actually don't agree with that. I actually think that it's a good thing when Christian leaders, whether they're Catholic or Protestant, part of preaching the gospel is talking about how the gospel applies to the issues of the day. So I've never been one of these people who say that you should never have, you know, Christian leadership not talking about politics, or frankly, political leaders not talking about their Christian faith. But I do think that we have to remember that, you know, each of us has our own role. I'm the Vice President of the United States. The fundamental way I understand my role is that I'm trying to
the Pope basically is saying that Trump should not have the war with Iran. But the thing is that the Pope didn't say that, to my knowledge, the Pope didn't say that Iran shouldn't have nuclear weapons. In addition, what about killing the 40,000, 20,000, or whatever thousand of the protesters that took place just a couple months ago? Pope didn't, you know, reiterate that that was wrong. So sometimes a hegemonic power like the United States has to come in and save the day, like Captain America. All right. What about this? You have all these people out there on the liberal side saying, listen to the Pope. He doesn't want the war in Iran. And that, you know, Trump is a warmonger and all this stuff. Well, Pope basically said that having an abortion is wrong too. You can't pick and choose, what a leader says and if you like it or not. Are you, is this really a person that you should pay attention to or not? Now, I personally think that there's a separation between church and state, so I don't think the Pope should get into our politics. But as an American citizen, which the Pope is, he has the freedom of expression, and because he's a citizen, he should have a say. But as a Pope, why doesn't he say something on the order of, going to war is bad, but sometimes you have to, all right? I mean, we had proxy wars during the Cold War. Look at John Paul II. He aligned himself with Reagan to end communism. Well, there were wars, and people died during the Cold War with the proxy wars and everything. The church was aligned with Reagan. Well, wait a minute, how can that be? See, what it is there's this new, Nietzsche's right. Nietzsche is right in terms of there is this slave morality within the Christian faith. And it weakens people. This idea of turning a cheek and, you can't go to war and all. But wait a minute here. Some wars are virtuous. Some wars you need to do. This is one of them. Not every war, but this is one of them. But again, there's a larger play here. And that is making sure that we don't have a war with China. So if you can strategically put your pieces in the right spot geopolitically, it reduces the chances of having war downstream in the Pacific. So saying don't have a war in Iran may actually cause a war in Asia. That's another problem with Pope Leo's point of view here. But he should have said to the public, shouldn't go into war, into Iran and kill innocent people and all this. And oh, by the way, you crazy liberals, stop having abortions. Oh, by the way, since 1972, 65 million fetuses have been destroyed because of abortion rights. Well, DrPaulCottrell, there are people that, that there's incest, cases, and there's rape cases, and those are the far small of the full population of the aborted fetuses. The majority of the aborted fetuses are due to economic reasons. They don't want to have a kid because of the economic reasons or the social dynamics of that, out of wedlock or whatever. That's the far majority of the reasons. It's not because of the far majority of the abortions aren't because of rape. I mean, get real. This total bullshit. Or the far majority of abortions aren't because they try to save the mother's life. There are cases that are like that. But you don't take a very thin-tailed situation in the probabilities and in the populations and project that as the norm. The norm is discarding the fetus because of social economic reasons. So why didn't the Pope say that? He should have. So Nietzsche's right that, there's something about the Christian religion where there is a failure to being able to move the ball forward because there is some sort of suicidal empathy that's taking place. Oh, you got to be apologetic because of, the Crusades. You got to be apologetic because of colonialism. You need to be apologetic for this and that and everything. Really? So what happens is that the right wing of the country in the United States ends up falling in the same trap that Nietzsche said they would. Because of the religion, they're enslaved. They have a slavery morality, and they can be taken over easily. And guess what? The Muslims know this. And that's how a caliphate can take hold. It took place in Dearborn. It took place in Hamtramck, Michigan, where there was this slave morality that Nietzsche's talking about within the Christian religion that led to a downfall of a Western culture. And what happened is that a Muslim culture took over because of suicidal empathy. So, Pope, if Nietzsche's right, the Christian faith is going to continue to actually erode, and that the Muslim population, the Muslim faith population and control of Western cities will increase.
The lessons, the moral truths that are rooted in Christianity, and I'm trying to apply them to a whole host of complicated real world scenarios. You know, thank you. So my job is to apply moral truth to try to do the best thing for the American people. That's my job, and that's the President of the United States' job. And of course, he's the person who leads our administration. The Pope's job is to preach the gospel. Okay, and again, I think that sometimes in the context, like, it doesn't bother me, even when I disagree with him. And I have a lot of respect for the Pope. I like him. I admire him. I've gotten to know him a little bit. It doesn't bother me when he speaks on issues of the day, frankly, even when I disagree with how he's applying a particular principle. So the most obvious example is, it has frustrated me that some of the Catholic clergy have attacked mercilessly the Trump administration on immigration. It is a constant idea that somehow everything that the Trump administration does when it comes to securing our borders is inhumane. And my constant response to that is, how is it humane to allow drug traffickers and sex traffickers to bring little kids across the southern border? Amen. How is that humane?
How is it humane to have unfettered access to the country and then have a legal system where you can't get rid of these illegal aliens? And then all of a sudden, your society becomes less productive and the culture starts to diminish and gets watered down. And it's not just happening in the United States, it's happening in Europe. So it's not humane to allow that to happen, to allow for unfettered access into a country. You don't have a country if you don't control your borders and you don't control your currency. So once again, this concept of, you can't go and round up illegals in your country, that's inhumane according to the Catholic Church, according to Leo, the Pope. That's inhumane. But yet, the end result is a dilution of your society. So Nietzsche was right. Suicidal empathy is going to be happening because of this slave morality. Now, Nietzsche didn't use the term suicide empathy. That's a more modern term of a concept that Nietzsche was talking about with slave morality of the Christian faith. Basically, Nietzsche said, Christian faith will weaken the society because they're not willing to move forward and be more aggressive. Now, it wasn't always like that. I mean, we had the Crusades, but unfortunately they lost. But the thing here is that there's too much of a push from the ultra-right to be a pacifist. And what will happen is that they actually fall into a slavery morality because of this pacifism. Now, on the ultra-left, what you're going to see is that they're not aligned with the Catholic Church. They don't observe the faith. And they also have a suicidal empathy where it's apologetic. So if the right stops being so apologetic of history, then it will break apart the curse that Nietzsche describes with the religious community, and maybe the society can move forward. Now, I'm for God, country, and family. I also am for, stop the proselytizing, all right? That's the reason why religion died off in the United States, was because people had too much proselytizing that was taking place. And because of this almost parochialness of it, people started gravitating to something opposite of parochialism, and that was more of this postmodern relativism. But by doing that, society has eroded God, country, and family pillars. So we need to strengthen religion, but don't over-proselytize, and don't fall into this trap that Nietzsche was saying with the Christians, that there is a slave morality of being too empathetic, too much empathy, too much. I know this sounds kind of counterintuitive, but by having too much empathy, you get taken advantage of. And then your society, your culture gets overrun. This is the warning of suicidal empathy in modern terms. So J.D. Vance is wrong in the sense that, you know what? You need to push back and say, you know what, Pope? You're saying things that on the surface, seem to be let's try to make the world a more peaceful place. But when you dive into the details of it, you're actually eroding Western culture.
But again, I'd almost rather have the conversation. So I kind of like, even when there's disagreement, I like it when the Pope comments on questions of immigration. I like it when the Pope talks about abortion. I like it when the Pope talks about matters of war and peace, because I think that at the very least, it invites a conversation. So I think some people, the reaction to this is to say, well, he shouldn't have said that. And look, there are certainly things that the Pope has said in the last few months that I disagree with. Let me just take like one very concrete example related to this conflict in Iran. So the Pope said something where he said, and I'm gonna try to remember the exact quote, but he said that God is never on the side of those who wield the sword. God is never on the side of those who wield the sword. I'm pretty sure that he said that exact statement. Now, on the one hand, again, I like.
How could that possibly be when it's written in Psalms about God protecting people when they need to go to war? How could that possibly be during the Crusades? How could that possibly be during World War II, fighting against the Nazis? How could that possibly be? But sometimes you need to fight. Sometimes you have to kill evil. Sometimes you need to preserve your culture, or you will lose it. You may be even losing your life in the process. This is the point that Nietzsche was making with the Christian faith. This is the very, very point that he was making. It is a slave morality. You will end up being a slave.
Is an advocate for peace. I think that's certainly one of his roles. On the other hand, how can you say that God is never on the side of those who wield the sword? Was God on the side of the Americans who liberated France from the Nazis? Was God on the side of the Americans who liberated Holocaust camps and liberated those innocent people from those who had survived the Holocaust? I certainly think the answer is yes, and I agree. Jesus Christ does not. I agree. Jesus Christ certainly does not support genocide. Whoever yelled that out from the dark, he certainly does not. I think that's pretty easy. I think that's a pretty easy principle. Okay, so here's a guy. Let me just say this. This is a guy. No. First of all, random dude who's shouting. Can I finish my point and then I'll respond to what you just shouted? Is that okay? Okay, great.
Can we give him 1 second to answer this?
So let me just finish this question on the Pope, and then I want to respond to what this guy said. So, number one, when the Pope says that God is never on the side of those who wield the sword, there is more than a 1,000-year tradition of just war theory. Okay? Now, we can, of course, have disagreements about whether this or that conflict is just, but I think that it's important in the same way that it's important.
This is the point that Nietzsche's saying. Nietzsche was right in calling off on what is eroding Western culture, and that is the suicidal empathy, slave morality. You got to realize that you have an enemy, you need to kill it, and you need to kill it fast, and you don't let it fester. No, you got to turn a cheek, and Jesus is going to come down and save you. Really? I mean, come on. Wake up. First of all, you got to take ownership of yourself. Second of all, once you take ownership of yourself and you want to be a better person, you can align with certain types of religions, such as Judaism or the Christian faith, or Islam, or even Buddhism, or even be an atheist, because you want to be a better person, okay? But you are looking in the mirror and you are saying, you know what? You are taking ownership of what you do, not some BS that some guy died for your sins and all this stuff, and that you'll be absolved of all your sins because of someone else. That is total bullshit. Total bullshit. You are responsible for yourself. When you die, when you go through the whole cleansing process of the soul, this is based on, theology, right? But if this process does take place, which I think it does, everyone is going to be judged based on their own situation. And that not some other person is going to be able to absolve that. You are responsible for everything that you've done good and everything that you've done bad. So here's part of the problem with this whole suicidal empathy. This is part of the problem of the slave morality. Oh, you don't have to do it. Some other person is going to come out of the sky and do it for you. You got to take charge of your own life. So take a look at Western culture. A lot of them, they want the government to come in and help them out. They want the government. Now, again, there is some overlap between ultraliberalism and ones that are of the faith. And that is someone else is going to come in and do it for you. Really? That doesn't seem to be the way natural law is. You have to try. It doesn't mean you'll succeed, but you have to put in the effort. And hopefully you get blessed. But sometimes you don't get blessed, but you still have to try. But you are responsible for the good and the bad that you do. And you will be judged accordingly. Not because of some sort of, that someone is going to absolve you of your wrongdoings. That doesn't make any sense. Because if that was the case, then why would anyone be good? Because you could just say, oh, it was bad, and I'm absolved because of some other person. No, everyone is responsible for themselves in trying to do the right thing. But if you do the wrong thing, in God's eyes, you are responsible. No one else. Not your grandmother, not your parents, not your friends, not your neighbor. You. So Nietzsche was right. Totally right.
the United States to be careful when I talk about matters of public policy. I think it's very, very important for the Pope to be careful when he talks about matters of theology. And I think that one of these issues here is that there has been, again, hey, random dude screaming, I told you I'd respond to your point. I just want to respond to this question first. But I think one of the issues here is that if you're going to opine on matters of theology, you've got to be careful. You've got to make sure it's anchored in the truth. And that's one of the things that I try to do. And it's certainly something I would expect from the clergy, whether they're Catholic or Protestant. Now, to respond to this guy here, he said, I believe he said the administration supports a genocide in Gaza. And here's my response to that. When we came in, the humanitarian situation in Gaza was an absolute catastrophe. You know who's the person who got a peace agreement in Gaza? Donald J. Trump. So if you want to complain about what happened in Gaza, so if you want, sir, to complain about what happened in Gaza.
And how is it a genocide? They're not even using the right word. Okay, I agree with the kung fu that J.D. Vance is doing. All right, but let's think about this for a sec. Genocide means that you're reducing the population radically based on some sort of ethnicity or some sort of, religious conviction or whatever. Okay, some regional issue. Right? You're trying to get rid of everybody of it. But how can you have a genocide when the population actually is going up? The Palestinians, the Gazans, the population is going up over time, not down. All right? So that's not a genocide. So, okay. So we're using the wrong term. Now, you could use the term, too much collateral damage with the civilians, which I think there was too much collateral damage. But the thing is that the Gazans allowed for Hamas to take hold. And Hamas had to be destroyed. Part of negative Esau. Now, unfortunately, there's a lot of collateral damage. People lost their homes, lost their property, lost their lives. They're in disarray. Their society is destroyed. But it's not a genocide. It's the wrong word. Did we cause genocide when we destroyed Germany in World War II? No. When we bombed Dresden, was that a genocide? No. What about bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Was that a genocide? No. Was there a lot of collateral damage? Were many civilians killed? Yeah. That's not a genocide. It's the wrong word. So words matter. We need to pick the right word for this. Right? There's a lot of collateral damage. Civilians are suffering. It may be inhumane, but it's not necessarily, quote, a war crime and not necessarily genocide. And the reality of the situation is this: no country deserves to be a country. Not Israel, not the United States, not Russia, not Japan, not China, nobody. But if you can hold it based on economic, military, you can hold the land and keep some sort of social cohesion, then it's yours. And that's what Israel is doing. Now, maybe Israel will fall. Maybe it won't. But to say the Gazans absolutely have a right to the land, no, they don't. They couldn't hold it. The moment you can hold the land, that's yours. There's no right to it. Now, there are people that would say that there is the Bible, states that the promised land for the Jews and da-da-da-da. All right? As long as Israel can hold it, it's theirs. It's that simple. So it's not about genocide. It's about them failing on the battlefield. Now, did the Israelis have overwhelming power, military power over the Gazans? Yeah, absolutely. But that's war. We had overwhelming power over Germany. Our manufacturing was far more than the Germans. Our manufacturing base was much bigger. And it allowed us to create the weaponry to be able to end the war. Now, of course, the Russians helped too. But was that a genocide? No.
Why don't you complain about Joe Biden in the last administration? We're the administration that solved that problem. And by the way, not only was our administration like the administration that solved the problem, but the president. Excuse me, sir. Right now, you see more humanitarian.
So he's screaming, you know, they're killing children. They're killing children. Well, wait a minute here. Iran funded Hamas. Iran funded Hezbollah. So it's important to root out Hezbollah, Hamas, and Iran. Get to the root cause. Kill off the immediate threat, Hamas and Hezbollah, and get to the root cause, Iran. That's exactly what's been playing out since October 7th of 2023. Well, everyone thought that Israel was going to fail. Now, assuming that there are some sort of blessings that take place, it is amazing on the success that has happened with Israel fighting its enemies and the United States fighting Iran. But that blessing may be taken away, and we should be thankful. Now, again, kids are getting killed, unfortunately. But the thing is having a regime like Iran continually funding Hezbollah and Hamas and letting them reconstitute is unacceptable. Arafat was given an opportunity to have a two-state solution, and he didn't take it during the Clinton administration because he wanted it all. Okay, it's war. Palestinians lost. The Israelis won. See? It's about, can you hold the land? Do you have the economic and the military prowess to have a country? And the answer is for Israel and also for the United States, that the answer is yes. The Palestinians don't have the economic nor the military prowess to have a country. That's just the way human history is. So you have these, individuals out there, that scream out, Trump's bad, and you're funding Israel to decimate Gaza. The whole region will have economic prosperity if the fighting stops. If Israel stops fighting with Hamas and Hezbollah, and if Hezbollah and Hamas stop launching rockets. They don't want to do that because they want to eliminate Israel. And Israel wants to eliminate the Palestinians. How's that any different than other wars in human history, in other regions of the world? Oh, it's genocide. No, it's not. Why doesn't the Arab nations take in the Palestinians? They have lots of land because they don't want them. The Jordanians don't even want the Palestinians, if you really want to go back into the history of this. So their own people don't even want them. Now, why is that? Because of the decades of fermenting hate because of the PLO. Arafat. Now let's go back to Arafat. Arafat would not be able to constitute the PLO if Sharon did the right thing and killed him on the battlefield. And Sharon regretted it. that if he could replay that, he would kill Arafat. Again, suicidal empathy. Now, Sharon Jewish fell into the same problem that Nietzsche was warning people about, and that is slave morality. If you're fighting your enemy, kill him. Don't play this patty cake game.
Coming into Gaza than it has any time in the past 5 years, because we have taken that situation seriously. And that's one of the things that I'm proud of about our administration, is whether it's there or Thailand and Cambodia, we've consistently tried as much as we can to solve these problems, not just complain about them like the guy who just ran away.
Exactly. You got to solve the problem. And, I covered this extensively over the last 2 years. And what was Al Jazeera and what were the Palestinians doing and in, the community in the Middle East at large? Frame it in a way where in the public sphere, demonize Israel and demonize the United States. And that the Palestinians were all just innocent. They're not innocent. Now, there are a lot of innocent people that are killed. There's collateral damage taking place. But they did it to themselves to allow Hamas and Hezbollah to take hold of their society. Why didn't they reach out to the United States and say, we have a problem with Hamas. We have a problem with Hezbollah. We need your help. They weren't willing to do that. Why? Because they literally thought they would win on the battlefield against Israel. They lost. Well, Scott Ritter says that, Israel is in a quagmire. Really? Have you taken a look at Gaza? Well, Israel is being defeated in the northern front. Really? They just took 30 kilometers of Lebanon. Well, Israel is going to be losing on the battlefield because of Syria. Israel has less conflict with Syria now because of the toppling of the regime. They're doing it right. The international community, especially the United States and Israel, working together to root out this negative Esau. Because if you do, there will be more peace in this world for everybody, for the Muslims, for the Jews, for the Christians, for everybody, the Buddhists, every nationality, there will be peace. But if you kick the can down the road and you allow negative Esau to stay alive, it's only going to cause problems. You have to get to the root of this Islamic terrorism that has been plaguing us for 47 years or more. Literally, a lot of the problems that they have in the Middle East right now, if Arafat was killed on the battlefield in 1968, would not have happened. Because Sharon was afraid. Sharon had empathy for Arafat and let him escape. Thanks, Sharon. Maybe we should actually listen to some of the philosophers. Maybe we need to look in the mirror and say, you know what? Maybe they're right about this. Maybe there is an issue with too much empathy in the society. Maybe there are certain religions that actually aren't willing to fight, and therefore it's easy for them to get taken over. And if that's the case, don't you think another religion or a group of people will take advantage of that weakness? And hence, Europe and in areas of the United States, Western culture is being attacked because of crazy immigration policies that the Pope supports. Once again, suicidal empathy. All right, let's go to the National Review talking about this subject, and let's see what they have to say. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the olive leaf extract. This will help to boost up your immune system and help with your cardiovascular system. It brings down inflammation and helps you to control your lipid profile. Digestive enzyme complex helps the health of your pancreas. It helps to break up proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids. Super important. You'll be able to digest better. Ashwagandha root controls cortisol levels and brings down your blood glucose levels. Now that's super important because there's too many people out there having a high sugary content diet. So you want to control your blood glucose levels and you want to control your cortisol levels. By doing that, you're bringing down inflammation, you're boosting up your immune system, and you're helping your cardiovascular system. Lignans brings down inflammation and soaks up free radicals, helps the immune system and endocrine system. And oh, by the way, helps with brain function and cardiovascular health. And probiotics. This is the veggie cap version. You can also get the powdered version. Taking a good probiotic is going to improve your skin, but also improve your digestion, boost up your immune system at the gut level, help with sleep. You'll sleep better. You'll be well rested. You'll be consolidating memory, getting rid of brain fog. Your metabolism will improve. Taking a good probiotic is super important for good health. So please go to my store. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Use discount 5, you get $5 off. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's see what National Review has to say about this whole Pope Leo stuff.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you might have heard, Donald Trump is having a little bit of a tiff with the Pope.
Hi, Robert. Barron supports you and your policies. Great reviews and defending the industry.
Yeah.
She now says you owe Pope Leo an apology. Will you apologize?
No, I don't, because Pope Leo said things that are wrong.
I'm just sorry at National Review, and I think most of us, even those of us who, like me, aren't Catholics, have a tendency, if there's a dispute between the pontiff on the one hand and a secular leader on the other, on any question with profound moral implications, you're going to reflexively think the Pope probably is getting the better of the argument. And there is no doubt that Trump has said outrageous things in the course of the Iran war, which precipitated this dispute with the Pope. And Trump shouldn't be attacking the Pope in the terms that he is, calling him weak on crime and all the rest of it. That is absurd. Yet, I think it is a Pope who is giving a misleading view, a misleading impression about what the Bible really says about warfare, which is a really important question.
Exactly.
That's what I want to address today. Let's first go to something that the Pope said during his Palm Sunday homily. This is an account in a journalistic outlet of his homily. Pope Leo went on to recall the prophet Isaiah's words, "Even though you make many prayers, I will not listen. Your hands are full of blood." Jesus is the King of Peace who rejects war, whom no one can use to justify war, said the Pope. He does not listen to the prayers of those who wage war, but rejects them. Now, Pope Leo is quoting there from the book of Isaiah, obviously a book of the Old Testament having to do with sin and judgment and repentance and hope. Now, he's making a very strong claim here that God does not listen to the prayers of those who wage war. If you take what Leo is saying literally, it's actually a preposterous claim. Are we saying that God didn't listen, to take easy examples among leaders of Western countries, didn't listen to Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War, didn't listen to Winston Churchill during World War II? There's some grunt in a trench somewhere who's completely righteous, but he's waging war, he's trying to kill an imperial Japanese soldier or whatever it is, and God's not going to listen to his prayer. That just seems crazy. And even in the context of Isaiah, this claim makes no sense whatsoever. Pope Leo is quoting chapter 1, verse 15, this very evocative language, we just heard it, about having blood on your hands. So God isn't going to listen to your prayers. So this kind of sounds like it's referring to military conflict, but it is not at all. This is a judgment of the people of Judah for their sins. They are outwardly religiously faithful, but inwardly they are not. They are hypocrites. They oppress the vulnerable in their own society. This is about their self-abasement, not a military conflict. So that's a real misleading use of that verse, and also is very strange given what else transpires in the book of Isaiah. The Assyrians are going to be an instrument of God's judgment. This big army is heading towards Jerusalem, and what does the king of Judah do? He prays to God to deliver them from this military menace. And you know what? The Assyrians are struck down. According to the Bible, 185,000 Assyrian soldiers are struck dead. So you could just as easily flip around what the Pope is saying and actually say the book of Isaiah shows that God does listen to the prayers of those who wage war. The fact of the matter is that the Bible treats warfare as a tragic but inevitable aspect of human existence. Ecclesiastes, there's a time for peace and there's a time for war. If you read the books of Joshua, Judges, Samuel, Kings, it's often a time of war. So for the Bible, the question is not necessarily one between peace and war. The key question is whether the war is righteous or not, whether it's being waged by a righteous people or not. So this is the distinction we see throughout the Old Testament between battles won by Israel or Judah or battles lost. It's a difference between a faithful people winning the battle of Jericho, winning the battle of Deborah, or a faithless people who turned to idolatry, getting smashed in a horrifying, historic defeat where the Babylonians take Judah and destroy Jerusalem. Now, there's a tendency on the part of some Christians to say, well, that's the Old Testament. That has nothing to do with us. In its most extreme form, this is the Marcion heresy. This has come up in a video before that totally rejects the Old Testament, but that heresy was discredited long ago. As Christians, the Old Testament belongs to us, obviously, as well. Now, it's true in the New Testament, we hear from Jesus a message overwhelmingly of love and mercy, but that is not a warrant for pacifism. How do you reconcile an ethic of love and mercy with the existence of evil in the world and the inevitability and necessity of warfare? Well, this is how we get just war theory. Some of the greatest Christian thinkers of all time, Augustine and Aquinas, come up with this basic idea. It's Augustine who works out the elemental arguments, and it's Aquinas who makes them more systematic. The basic idea is that a war has to have a just cause. It can't be for the sake of conquest or exploitation, and a war must be waged justly. You have to go out of your way to minimize civilian casualties. It has to be waged in a proportional manner. So this is the key moral test that the Catholic Church, by the way, itself accepts. Now, Pope Leo apparently believes the Iran war does not meet this test, but his view is not dispositive. It's not binding on Catholics. It's his opinion about a contemporary matter. Obviously, that's his right to have that view, but I think where he's wrong is he's creating this impression through his statements that there's no such thing ever as a just war, and that is just wrong. And by the way, he might consider, with regard to the Iran war, Trump first started threatening to attack the Iranians when they were in the midst of slaughtering tens of thousands of protesters in their own streets. And if Trump were actually to succeed in toppling this regime and something were to replace it that were more respectful of the rights of Iranians, that would be a boon to the Iranian people and make the region safer and more peaceful. It's understandable, though, that Trump's wild threats are completely anathema to Pope Leo when Trump talks about, say, ending Iranian civilization. Even if he's BSing, even if he doesn't mean it, that is likely going to cause the Pope to speak out. That is completely fair game. But it doesn't change the fact that the Bible acknowledges warfare as an unfortunate fact of human existence. Yes, as the book of Isaiah famously says, they shall beat their short swords into plowshares, but not yet. I'm Rich Lowry, over and out.
So basically, he said the same thing I said. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the structural nano silver drops and lozenges. We're in the allergy season. The moment you start getting allergies and you're getting a little bit of a sore throat or even some drainage, take the drops or the lozenges. You can get it in cherry flavor, honey and lemon, and also in blueberry. The lozenges you can get in orange splash and in manuka honey. Very high quality. The moment you have that throat irritation due to the cold season or the allergy season, take them right away. They'll help to neutralize. Super important. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And also get the vitamin B complex. Vitamin B complex will boost up your energy levels. The first 4 B vitamins helps boost up ATP. It's a major energy molecule within your cell. It will rev up your cellular metabolism and protect your neurons through vitamin B12. So please go to my store, get the vitamin B complex. Super important to take, especially if you're 40 years of age or older. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's listen into Rogoff being interviewed by Bloomberg.
Risk is a constant. It's something to embrace and manage. When the pressure is on, I feel right at home. How do you manage risk?
CME Group, where risk meets opportunity.
So we're looking at U.S. futures. We're back at 7,000 in the S&P. VIX futures suggest this war is mission accomplished. Are markets getting this one correctly, and as far as what the economic fallout is likely going to be on the back end of this?
I mean, I find it puzzling that it's sort of no problem. We have lived in a very volatile situation. I think what markets look at is that we had the tariffs, we had this, and the resilience was phenomenal. Maybe the AI, the background of AI and growth, maybe all the deregulation that's been going on in the Trump administration. Some of it, I think, very good. Some of it very ill-advised. Both of them making things go forward. So, it's coming from a high level, but I think it's naive to think it's mission accomplished. I think it's a temporary respite. The Iranian regime is still in place. Frankly, the U.S. regime is still in place. And I think more things will happen. But again, the markets have just decided, doesn't matter, everything's going to be fine now. I think it's a little naive.
And you said this could potentially be bigger than Liberation Day, what we saw with the tariff impact last year. How are you factoring in all the consequences of this war now economically? Is it going to be stagflation light? Some are even saying, if you're going to shut down 20% of the oil supplies in the Strait of Hormuz, that could lead to a recession. How are you assessing the second order and third order effects too of this war?
Well, I mean, it's definitely a big stagflationary shock, even as it stands. And following on the tariffs, which are also a stagflationary shock, and still working their way through the system. I mean, it depends on how far it goes, how things react. I think over the medium term, this pushes interest rates up, not down. There's inflation is not coming down. It's been up for many years. The Federal Reserve says, oh, don't worry about the tariffs, don't worry about this, don't worry about the next thing. And after a while, expectations will adjust. And I think real interest rates are being pushed up, inflation-adjusted interest rates, because more military spending, populism, high debt levels everywhere. So I think this is the kind of shock that the systems are not that resilient longer term.
You bring up a very good point, because we were already having trouble getting inflation back into range before the war started, and here we are. And I wonder, does central bank need to rethink that 2% number? Does 2.5 make more sense given the realities that we have?
Well, first of all, most people have no idea what inflation is, not just if it's 2 or 2.5%, but my colleagues at Harvard who do surveys on this find that the average person, most of them have no idea even what the definition of inflation is. So if it stays moderate, it's not so bad, and probably no one notices. No, I don't think the Federal Reserve should change what it says it's trying to do. But the trouble is, and people notice it drifting up and prices not coming down. And so it's certainly a problem. I don't think you can wish it away. It makes it harder. What seemed to be coming along, inflation coming down, and now postponed further.
What does this mean for the dollar? I mean, I think when the Iranians suggested that any sort of safe passageway through the Strait of Hormuz was going to be paid in either crypto or renminbi, it did raise a lot of eyebrows on what the outlook for the dollar is. We have seen this whole theme of de-dollarization, but how much do you think that narrative has been eroded now?
Well, it depends on how the war works out, right? I mean, if it's a big win for the United States, it's probably good for the brand, probably strengthens the U.S. hand. Military power is a part of the strength of the dollar. On the other hand, it doesn't go well if it looks more like Iraq or Vietnam, which is a very much a possibility still here. All possibilities are there. Then I think it's negative. I mean, regardless, Asia, which is half the dollar block, is dominated by China. China has been working for some time to build out its back office, its pipelines. It's switching, at least its imports, pretty rapidly into RMB. It's working on the exports. And I think what Iran was saying was really just in place with what a lot of countries were saying. It didn't surprise me at all. What are they going to do? Ask to be paid in dollars and then find out there's a sanction on them and they can't use them?
Well, the fact that they're going to swap line, that's a different.
Maybe if they were going into business with them on controlling the Straits of Hormuz, as Trump suggested, who knows?
That was an option. That's right. I mean, we were coming off. So we had this war. Prior to that, we had tariffs. Prior to that, we had the pandemic. All three forced companies to rethink their supply chains and trade lanes. Does this accelerate that phase, you think?
Oh, I mean, for sure. I don't know how things are going to reorient themselves. It'll change what kinds of energy countries use. But if we step back, it also underscores how Europe and, say, India and many parts of Asia are really weak in building out their electricity. They're not competitive in AI already because they don't have enough electric power to support it. And now this underscores it, where they're having problem maintaining what they have. So, I don't know what action we'll take, but I certainly sense on the European side maybe some real movement on both trying to be more independent from the dollar, building out their own back office, doing what China is doing, having swap lines in euro, and also trying, to build up electricity. India, but this really, it hurt the rest of the world much more than the United States. That's part of why it happened. If the U.S. were taking the hit that its allies were taking in the Middle East, that Asia has been taking, that the Europeans have been taking, I don't think it would have happened that the U.S. did this, our dollar, your problem. We're doing it, we don't really care. And I think in the long run, this sort of undermines the leadership of the U.S. Again, if it turns out, whoa, brilliant, they took out this regime, they're now becoming part of a normal Middle East, the world is developing, it's different. We don't know how it's coming out, but it definitely could go the other way.
China, obviously has, in some ways, been a voice of stability in this whole world order in some ways. I'm just wondering, in terms of the economy, there's this also idea that they're a bit more resilient because they have the cheap energy. They've been transitioning into renewables for the past 10 years. How resilient do you think China and the economy is to these global shocks that we're seeing now?
Well, on the one hand, China's economy has been in a very weakened position for a long time due to its overbuilding of real estate and infrastructure way out into the Netherlands and China, way out in the hinterlands, I should say. And It's still working that out. I think it's got years to go. That's a big part of the economy. And these things like electric vehicles, having solar panels, they're small potatoes compared to the size of the real estate industry. But that said, I mean, there's a tremendous determination in China to keep moving forward. If there's a step back, we're going to keep moving forward. A lot of resilience to the system. I've listened to discussions in the United States of, well, how do we get around China? How do we homeshore? How do we not have this? And it's almost like a joke. It's clear that it's not easy to do. I mean, at the moment, the U.S. is basically importing the parts it needs to fight a war with China with. I mean, it's sort of at that level. And the idea, of striking independence, China has a lot of determination, a lot of state capacity. They make mistakes. They go too far in one direction like they did in real estate. And I think we're seeing it in other things. The idea they'll just grow to the moon is wrong. And the IMF's forecasts for them, I think, are still optimistic, where they have it coming down to 4%. I think if China averages 3% growth over the next 10 years, they'll be doing well. But it will be doing better than the United States. And so, certainly China is coming, but slower.
This 3-4% growth in China, you think, to still inflationary forces
I'm gonna pivot over to Al Jazeera. They're talking about the talks being forged for this war in Iran. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the clarity factor. This will get rid of that brain fog, allow you to concentrate. And taking this every day is going to improve your memory and your neural connections. That's super important for brain health. It's a very powerful neurostack. Take it every day. Drink it with filtered water. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last.
Which comes amid heightened tension in the Strait of Hormuz. The US military says it's effectively stopped maritime trade to and from Iran, but has not specified the exact boundaries of the blockade. Iran has warned that it will block trade through the Red Sea, along the Gulf and the Sea of Oman if the US blockade continues. We're live from Riyadh, Washington, D.C., Tehran and Islamabad. This hour we begin in the Pakistani capital with Al Jazeera's White House correspondent Kimberly Halkett. Kimberly, Pakistan Foreign Ministry sources told Al Jazeera that it's again offered to host talks. Pakistan, it seems, determined to get these parties back around the table.
That's right. And we know that since the delegation of the United States and Iran left on Sunday morning, there have been messages that have been exchanged at the working group level. And so it is not surprising that we can confirm, as well as not only the foreign ministry, but the Pakistani military confirming that this delegation is now in Tehran. It is, as you point out, headed up by the military chief or field marshal and is being received by the Iranian foreign minister. Now, their messaging that they're carrying is still a bit of a mystery. All we know is that this is a message from Washington that is being delivered by Islamabad to Tehran. And the motive for all of this is, of course, to get the second round of direct talks between the United States and Iran going. Now, it's not surprising that the field marshal is leading up this delegation, given the fact that we know Donald Trump has struck a rapport with him and that they get along well. And that, we believe, is part of what has facilitated this communication back and forth. But again, the U.S. president himself had said that these talks would take place in the coming days. And I can tell you, the signals on the ground certainly indicate that that's imminent. Not only is security extremely tight and getting more so by the day, but also hotels are filling up. And I can tell you, after speaking to U.S. officials here at the embassy, they also said they were preparing for some sort of event, but would not give a specified time.
Our White House correspondent Kimberly Halkett reporting live from Islamabad. Kimberly, many thanks indeed. Let's bring in Al Jazeera's Ali Hashem, who's live for us in Iran's capital, Tehran. What are Iranian officials saying, Ali, about the prospect of another round of talks?
Well, Adrian, the Iranian officials just received the Pakistani commander-in-chief, who arrived in Tehran alongside with a senior delegation. According to what's circulating, they are conveying an American message to the Iranian leadership. Now, we expect him to meet with Abbas Araghchi. Already he met him at the airport. We expect him also to meet, or probably, with Mohammed Bakr Khalibaf if security measures allow. But the most important thing that we understood that this visit is mainly to set the timing for the next Iran-US talks that is going to happen in Islamabad. Yesterday we spoke to a senior Iranian official who said there's nothing yet said, but we know that if there's anything going to happen, then it's going to happen in Islamabad. Now we know that the Pakistanis are here to put the last touches for the next round. Also, it seems that more and more delegation is going on between the Americans and the Iranians. There are kind of messages being exchanged between the two sides in order to get closer and closer to the framework that they can agree on. In the past few days, there were suggestions that the next meeting is going to be on the level of technicians and experts. Now things might change, and the meeting could see both the experts, technicians on one layer meeting, and on the other layer, politicians, officials, just like the last time.
Ali, I'll be back with you in just a few minutes. As we mentioned, the US military says that a blockade of Iranian ports has been fully implemented, but CENTCOM hasn't said where the maritime boundary of the blockade begins, making independent verification difficult. This live map shows a handful of oil tankers marked as red icons and cargo ships, the ones in green, currently in and near the waterway. Now, arrows indicate that the vessels are moving. Dots show those that are stationary. Hundreds of vessels remain stuck, concerned by threats of attack. The US military says that it's working to support freedom of navigation for vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz from non-Iranian ports. Live from the White House, our chief US correspondent, Alan Fisher, is there for us. We'll talk about the Strait in just a moment, Alan, but President Trump has been posting this morning on Truth Social about China and its relationship with the Strait of Hormuz. What's he been saying?
Well, he said in an interview in the last few hours that there had been an exchange of letters with the Chinese president. Remember, he's due to meet him at a summit in Beijing in essentially middle of next month, just over 3 weeks. So he did put something out on Truth Social. We can take a look at it on screen while I read through it. China is very happy that I'm permanently opening the Strait of Hormuz. I'm doing it for them also and the world. This situation will never happen again. They've agreed not to send weapons to Iran. President Xi will give me a big fat hug when I get there in a few weeks. We're working together smartly and very well. Doesn't that beat fighting? But remember, we are very good at fighting if we have to, far better than anyone else. Now, a couple of things. Donald Trump reacting to news reports that China was preparing to send some surface-to-air missiles to Iran to improve their aerial defenses. He says that in the letter that essentially Xi Jinping has said, essentially that's not going to happen. I think the word essentially might be doing some heavy lifting there. And clearly Donald Trump believes that the Strait of Hormuz must remain open. He often says that the United States doesn't need anyone else to help them keep that open.
Now, in the latest book from Daniel Yergin, The New Map, he goes into detail about what China is very worried about in terms of the United States being in the Middle East, circumventing oil flows to China. Now, their energy consumption is heavily dependent on coal. But most of that coal is domestic in China, all right? The use of oil and natural gas, they don't have a lot of that in terms of domestic production. This is part of the reason why they want the 9-dash line to be able to extract some of those resources in the ocean or in the sea. But Trump being able to be in Iran and controlling that flow worries China. So Trump's saying, you know what? We'll make sure that you have your oil, but just make sure you don't send weapons to Iran, and everything will be copacetic. But if China thinks that they're going to be able to circumvent that agreement, that gentleman's handshake, all right, between Xi and Trump, the United States could easily chokehold China. This is the reason why getting into that region and controlling Iran is super important. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the structural nano silver gel. You can get it in the tube form or in the quick dispenser form. Have some at work, have some at home. You never know when you need it. It's dual purpose. If you have a cut, an abrasion, or a minor burn, apply it on the lesion. It'll help to heal it quicker. You can use it as daily skincare to improve your skin. And if you're not feeling well because of the cold season, or someone around you not feeling well, put it on your hands. It stays active for 5.5 hours. But you can also put it around your eyes, around your ears, around your mouth, around your nose, and lightly coat your nostrils. Stays active and helps to neutralize. Please go to my store, get the structural nano silver gels. And also structural nano silver toothpaste. It neutralizes, it whitens your teeth, freshens your breath, helps with the health of your gum line, reduces inflammation at the gum line, and with good oral hygiene, you're also improving your cardiovascular health. A lot of people don't realize that bacteria can get into your bloodstream, or little pieces of small plaque can get into the bloodstream if you have really bloody gum line, and that can cause havoc to your vascular system, cause inflammation and lead to vascular disease. So you want to stop that. Good oral hygiene does help cardiovascular health. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the toothpaste. This has the structural nano silver to help to neutralize. It's the best toothpaste you're going to be able to get, and it has no fluoride in it. And Myotrol. Myotrol will help to build muscle and maintain muscle. If you're 40 years of age, male or female, you can't build muscle like you were when you were younger. This will help with the gene expression to build muscle. It has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to be able to do that. It will also help the health of your mitochondria, so you're maintaining the muscle. You're reducing atrophy. This is super important to slow down the aging process. Now, you can benefit from Myotrol if you're a younger or older athlete. It'll help you to build the strength for your sport. So if you're an athlete, or you're 40 years of age or older, male or female, you will benefit from taking Myotrol. Do some resistance training. You don't have to do a lot, and you'll be able to build muscle. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the Myotrol, use discount 5. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last.
So here they have clearly stated that first, their priority is diplomacy, and they want ceasefire to hold. So to make sure that the ceasefire is not collapsed, and to do that, they are using their economic and political leverages on both parties, and also coordinating their force with the regional countries. So on the other hand, there are 3 clear demands that they want. First, they do not want any change in the status of State of Hormuz, as Iran is claiming to keep its control even after the war, and come up with a new protocol and new regulations, so that the GCC countries are saying that is not acceptable. The State of Hormuz, this critical waterway, is under the guarantees of the international conventions, and any change in that status is not acceptable, because for them, simply Iran charging the toll fees practically means charging the GCC countries. And the second concern for GCC countries, particularly Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, are the Iranian-affiliated proxies in Iraq. So throughout the 38 days, we have seen hundreds of drones being fired by them
They want the guarantees that these proxies are not going to remain as a threat. And the third concern is the Iranian missile program. We have seen hundreds of them have been aimed and fired toward the GCC, causing tremendous damage. And now they say after the war, so Iran's missile program should not remain as a threat for the GCC security.
All right, we are, a week into this 2-week ceasefire. It goes without saying that Gulf nations are, of course, eager to avoid any return to conflict.
Indeed, that is a nightmare scenario for many of them. So again, the damage was huge. Nearly 8,000 projectiles were fired at the GCC countries. So the international airports have been hit, refineries have been hit, petrochemical facilities have been hit, just in Saudi Arabia. So Jubail, the largest industrial city in the region, was hit several times. Then Manifa, gas Manifa facility, then the Race facility, then the Eastern Province, West Anura, and then the Yanbu city of the industrial city. So Saudi Arabia is simply saying that as a result of that, the daily loss of the oil is 1.3 million barrels of oil, which makes monthly around 4 billion losses. And we're just talking about the oil, regardless of the material damage. So, and then in Qatar, Ras Laffan, the largest LNG facility in the world, and Habshan in the United Arab Emirates, the largest gas facility there. So on a daily basis, we're talking about billions of dollars of the losses, and they see that if the ceasefire collapses and the war breaks again, then perhaps it's not going to be contained, and it's going to even further deepen and becoming a real existential security threat for the GCC countries. That's why now they are coordinating the efforts and trying to make sure that the ceasefire works and eventually leads to a peace settlement.
All right, Razul, many thanks indeed. Don't you see this? Razul Soda reporting live from Riyadh, European Council.
All right. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the resveratrol. This will help the basal layer of your skin to improve the health of the new cells that are being generated. This is the reason why you will look younger when you take resveratrol. But resveratrol also helps with youthful gene expression, so your other tissues will perform better. It will also get rid of cells that are in senescence, and it'll improve your energy levels by improving the health of your mitochondria by soaking up free radicals. This is really important to take. It stacks really well with C60. You get the max benefit out of resveratrol when you stack it with C60, especially with the skin. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the resveratrol and help with youthful gene expression. Super important, because when you get older, you have more methylization of your genes and they start to change. The expression changes, less youthful expression. Well, you want to reverse that. You want to try to slow down that methylization. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the resveratrol. And also, Max 35 or cleanse. Take a teaspoon a day every day. Swish it in your mouth, gargle about 20 seconds and swallow it. What this will do is improve your oral cavity, improve your oral pharynx, maintain a mucosal barrier, and help with the health of your epithelial cells. Your immune system will be boosted up. Your innate immune system will be boosted up. And these will help to neutralize. Super important during the allergy season and during the cold season. But I take this every day as part of a larger protocol to help to slow down the aging process. I've been doing this for 6 years, this protocol. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, take a teaspoon a day every day. Now, you can stack this with C60, which will soak up the free radicals, turmeric ashwagandha lignans to help with your cardiovascular health and your immune system by bringing down inflammation, and Boomer Boost to rev up your energy levels. Should also stack it with the probiotics and the multivitamin to help with your gut biome. And when you stack that together, what you're doing is you're slowing down the aging process, bringing down that inflammation, soaking up those free radicals, improving the health of the tissues and your organ systems, You're improving your immune system, you're improving your endocrine system, you're helping with your brain function, you're helping with your cardiovascular health, you're helping with your musculature. So all these things are being targeted. And by doing that, you're going to be able to slow down the aging process. So you should take my advice. It's up to you, but it works. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the great supplements that I offer. Make sure you use discount 5 and you get $5 off. You spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Now, I want to end on a clip talking about Mamdani. Mamdani makes stunning admission on prices at city-run grocery store. So let's see what Fox News has to say about Mayor Mamdani.
All right, New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani unveiling the very first city-run grocery store with a whopping $30 million price tag.
Since the pandemic, grocery prices have gone up, and they haven't come back down. During our campaign, we promised New Yorkers that we would create a network of city-owned grocery stores, one in each borough. And we are here today to celebrate the site of the Manhattan store, La Maqueta, which will be open by 2029.
Joining us now to wrap, senior writer for the Washington Examiner and Fox News contributor Joe Concha. Joe, they, and by they, of course, I mean 100% the private sector, opened a discount grocery store in my town. You know what, Joe? Took less than a year to build, and guess what? Cost a lot less than $30 million. So what the heck is Mamdani celebrating here?
Well, that's a very good question, Todd. And this was a campaign of a smiling socialist con man from the very beginning. And 51% of New York voters who should have known better, they fell for it. These city-run stores are already projected to cost twice as much as Zohran Mamdani first promised. And we know the way things work in New York and in this area in general. If they're projected at X now, by the time they're done, it'll probably be double and triple that. And now he's saying that the first of 5 stores won't open until 2029? I mean, shut the front door here. I mean, by the way, how will opening 5 city-run grocery stores, where some of the prices will be no different than non-city-run stores, Mamdani's admitting that now, how will that make it more affordable for 8 million people, where there are already more than 1,000 food stores to choose from? So between this and the free buses that may never come, and the free childcare that's definitely never going to come because the billions just ain't there, Zohran Mamdani's social media prowess and making the city more unlivable and certainly not more affordable, that may well be his legacy. He's currently at 48% approval right now, where you say, hey, that's pretty good. Problem is, Eric Adams was in the 60s at this point of his first term, as was Bill de Blasio. So he's already going south in a hurry because people are realizing that, yeah, they got con.
Okay, quick clip here from Mamdani admitting that not all things that are sold at this grocery store are going to be sold at a lower price. Listen.
When it comes to the products that we will be selling at these city-run grocery stores, there will be an essential basket of goods that will be guaranteed at a cheaper price.
Zohran Mamdani
got in his face there.
But you know, I was thinking about this. This could possibly work because apparently there's going to be, like you said, this basket of goods like milk, eggs, bread that are going to be sold at a cheaper price. But then it sounds like everything else is just going to be standard.
Pretty much, yeah.
Socialism never works.
You know, I lived in the city for a while. Carly, I know you did as well. You go to the grocery store that's like maybe a block or 2 from you, because a lot of people don't have cars, right? They use the public transit system. So again, opening 5 stores in such a sprawling city, if this is how you make things more affordable, I just don't see how it works. And to Todd's point, when we first came on, when this has been tried in so many other towns and cities throughout the country, almost always it fails, and it fails quickly. So that's where we're at this point. I just don't see how this makes a dent in a city that's becoming increasingly unaffordable. And as a result, more people are leaving for places like Tennessee, Texas, and Florida because there ain't no income tax, state income tax in those places.
Before we let you go, I want to squeeze this in. The Justice Department's weaponization working group publishing a report revealing the Biden administration's bias against pro-life Americans. It is severe. And one thing that stood out to me, one of the documents, one of the assistant U.S. attorneys, you know, an officer of the court, somebody who's tasked with implementing the law here, writes, unfortunately, we ended up with a very Catholic magistrate this week. He was very particular about not infringing on their First Amendment rights. This individual mentions this like that's a problem. Like, oh no, we have to follow the First Amendment, Joe. What was going on in that administration?
I mean, that's the funny thing about the Biden administration. His allies in the media would continually tell us, including the president then himself, that he's actually a devout Catholic who just happens to believe in, abortion. Overall, when you peel off this terrible, horrible, no good, very bad presidency, it continues to reveal itself as one of the more corrupt and weaponized administrations we have seen in our lifetime or any lifetime. And let's not forget that Merrick Garland, who was the Otto Penn's older Attorney General, he was once considered to be a moderate for the Supreme Court, and then he proved himself to be anything.
This is exactly what I was saying about the ultra-liberal. The ultra-liberal doesn't believe in family, the family pillar of society. So they're against the pro-lifers. But not just that, they're for killing fetuses. The Biden administration was biased against pro-life Americans. But the Biden administration was also biased towards individuals that wanted to kill their fetuses. Call it for what it is.
Respect for the office or for the law, and Joe Biden, obviously, a one-term president who was forced out by his own party. That is his legacy. And unfortunately, Catholics, pro-life people in particular, always seem to get the short end of the stick in these situations because I guess they're seen as a minority in some place. I guess.
Joe Concha, live for us, Joe. Thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate it.
All right, that's
Be sure to like and
that's the end of my broadcast. Thank you for listening. I greatly appreciate it if you share the links and ask your social media to follow me. All the links are in the description here. Please click them and subscribe. And go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Stack the supplements that I have the way I've been saying on many of these shows to help slow down the aging process and boost up your health. It does work. You have to be vigilant. So please, go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. And if you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Thank you for listening, and have a nice day.